Your home lab is one bad day away from disaster. Think about that for a second. You go to update your favorite self-hosted apps and you get a 404. The GitHub repo is gone, the Discord is gone, the website is gone. No warning, no deprecation notice, no goodbye, just nothing. Or worse, you find out that an app you've been running on your network has been silently leaking every API key in your entire media stack to anyone who knew where to look. Both of these things happened in the self-hosted community this year, a few weeks apart. And if you weren't paying attention, you might not have heard about either of them. Today, we're going to talk about what happened, why it keeps happening, and most importantly, what you can do to protect yourself before it happens to you.
Hey guys, just wanted to take a second to interject here. While I'm editing this video, I can see how I look. My allergies are killing me, but I wanted to address it so that you guys don't have to bring it up repeatedly in the comments. I know how I look, I know how I sound. It's my allergies. I've got an appointment this afternoon. Everything's going to be okay. Let's get back into the video.
Let's start with Booklore. If you haven't heard of it, Booklore was a self-hosted digital library platform. Think Plex, but for your ebook and comic collection. It could read a variety of formats, pull metadata automatically, and sync your library across devices. Polished interface, active community, over 10,000 GitHub stars. It was the kind of app that people genuinely love and recommended without hesitation. Then, in early 2026, cracks started forming. Community members noticed that the solo developer behind the project, who went by ACX, was pushing code that looked a little different than before. Specifically, some pull requests were coming in with around 20,000 lines of AI-generated code at a time. When community members raised concerns about the quality of that code, ACX downplayed it and pushed back. Then, in March, a Reddit post went viral detailing multiple controversies surrounding the project. The developer met that community criticism, which was honestly valid, with hostility. And with the writing on the wall, ACX went nuclear. The GitHub repository disappeared, the Discord server vanished, and the website went dark. Booklore even disappeared from the TrueNAS app catalog the same day. No deprecation notice, no migration guide. Users just started hitting 404 errors. And what made it worse, there had already been a security patch labeled critical shipped a few weeks earlier with no CVE numbers, no public disclosure timeline, and no explanation beyond fix security vulnerabilities. Just a changelog entry and silence. The community moved fast. Within days, former contributors forked the project and launched Grimmory, a drop-in replacement that picks up right where Booklore left off. One of the first things they did was strip out the telemetry entirely. The community didn't just save the software. They started fixing the things that caused the problems in the first place. Grimmory is now at over 2,300 GitHub stars, and active pull requests are coming in daily. The story has a reasonable ending, but it didn't have to be that close. Now, let's talk about Huntarr. And this one is more serious because it's not just about an app disappearing. It's about an app that may have already compromised your security while it was running. Huntarr was an automation tool built on top of the R stack. Think sonar, radar, prowler, LiDAR. And it sat in the middle of your media automation setup and handled discovery and management across all of those apps. And it was popular in Homelab and media server circles and had built a solid following. In February of 2026, a security researcher did a thorough review of Huntarr version 9.4.2 and documented what they found. 21 findings total, 7 critical and 6 high severity. The worst one, and I want you to really hear this, a single unauthenticated API call could return every API key in your entire R stack in clear text. No login required. Anyone on your network or on the internet, if you had it exposed, could send one request and walk away with your sonar API key, your radar API key, your prowler API key, all of it sitting in the response body. Passwords were stored in plain text in the SQLite database. Two-factor authentication could be bypassed without any credentials, and the Docker container ran as root by default. This wasn't a single bug that someone missed. It reflected a fundamental absence of security practices throughout the entire codebase. When the security researcher brought this to the maintainer's attention, here's what happened. The person who reported it got banned. Other community members who raised similar concerns also got banned. Posts got deleted. The r/Huntarr subreddit went private. The maintainer's Reddit account disappeared, and the GitHub repository was taken down. No patch, no statement, no acknowledgement, just a scorched earth cleanup and silence. If you were running Huntarr, especially if it was accessible on your network or exposed to the internet, the community advice is clear. Take it offline and rotate the API keys for every connected app immediately. 2 apps, 2 solo developers, 2 nuclear shutdowns within weeks of each other. That's a pattern, not a coincidence. And here's a number that should give you pause. Of the 11.8 million open source projects tracked by one monitoring service, roughly 7 million are maintained by a single person. That's not a fringe situation. That's the default state of open source software. And the economics behind these single maintainers are rough. 60% of open source maintainers are unpaid for their work. 60% have quit or seriously considered quitting their projects. Burnout, competing life demands, loss of interest, these aren't edge cases. They're the norm. I want to be fair here, though, and mention ErsatzTV, which also archived its repository around this same time. The maintainer there handled it the right way, though. They announced the final release publicly, gave the community proper notice, and archived the repositories cleanly. That's what responsible project closure looks like. Booklore and Huntarr are the cautionary tales precisely because they did the opposite. The self-hosting community trusted those apps because they had polished interfaces, active Discord servers, and impressive star counts. But none of those things tell you anything about the engineering practices underneath. Stars are a vanity metric. Commit history tells the truth. I know what some of you are thinking right now, and I hear you. Look, the concerns about AI moving fast and changing everything are legitimate. Healthy skepticism about powerful new technology has historically been warranted, and science fiction has a pretty decent track record of seeing things coming before the rest of us did. The same movie that gave us HAL 9000, 2001: A Space Odyssey, predicted tablets so accurately that Samsung actually cited it in a court case against Apple over the iPad design patent. The Jetsons had video calls decades before Zoom existed. The internet itself was essentially predicted in William Gibson's Neuromancer in 1984. Sci-Fi gets things right more often than we give it credit for. So, if you're in the camp that thinks AI is moving too fast and not enough people are thinking carefully about what that means, you're not wrong to feel that way. But here's where I want to offer a different frame. AI coding tools are genuinely getting better. That's not hype, it's real, and it's going to keep improving. A skilled developer using AI assistants can build things faster than ever before, and the quality of what they produce is only going to improve over time. But better AI doesn't fix bad process. You still need to know what to ask for. You still need to understand what code is doing well enough to verify it. You still need a testing pipeline, you still need code review, ideally from people who weren't the ones who wrote it, and you absolutely need security auditing before you ship something to the public that's going to sit on people's networks handling their credentials. Huntarr is the clearest example of what happens when none of that exists. The app looked polished, it had features, it worked. Until someone looked at the API endpoints without logging in and found the entire configuration sitting there in the response. A proper code review would have caught that. A security audit would have caught that. A testing pipeline that included authentication testing would have caught that. And none of those things existed. The problem wasn't the AI. The problem was one person, no review process, no testing pipeline, and no security practices shipping to production anyway. And this is actually a known risk with vibe-coded projects specifically. There's even an emerging attack called slop squatting, where AI tools occasionally suggest package names that don't exist, and attackers register malicious packages with those names so that developers who blindly accept the AI suggestions end up importing malware directly into their projects. Better tools, worse habits, same result. The technology isn't the villain here. The process, or the complete absence of one, is. So what do you actually do about this? Well, let's talk about that in 2 parts. What to look for before you adopt something, and how to protect yourself after you've already deployed it. Part 1, before you deploy. First, check the contributor count. Is one person holding all of the keys, or is there a team? A project with multiple active contributors has a much lower chance of vanishing overnight because one person had a bad week. Second, look at recent commit activity, not the star count. Stars are a snapshot of past popularity. Commit history tells you whether anyone is actually working on it right now. A project with 15,000 stars and no commits in 8 months is a different risk profile than one with 2,000 stars and weekly updates. Third, look at how the maintainer responds to bug reports and criticism. This is an easy one to check and incredibly revealing. If you see a maintainer deleting comments, banning users who raise legitimate concerns, or responding to bug reports with hostility, that's your signal to walk away. Fourth, look for a security disclosure policy. Does a security.md file exist in the repository? Is there a process for reporting vulnerabilities responsibly? If there isn't, that tells you something about how security is being treated overall. Fifth, check where the Docker image lives. If it's on a registry that the project controls and that project disappears, so does your ability to pull the image. So know where your images are coming from. Sixth, read the changelog. Are breaking changes landing without warning or migration paths? A developer who respects their users gives notice. One who doesn't is telling you something. Now, part 2. After you've already deployed, pin your image tags. Never run latest on anything that you depend on. Tag a specific version and update deliberately, not automatically.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
And for those of you who don't know, yes, my name actually is David. Now look, I know some of you are already in the comments typing, that's the developer's responsibility. And you're right, it absolutely is. But Huntarr's developer had that responsibility too, and we just spent 5 minutes talking about how that went. Pinning your images isn't about letting bad developers off the hook. It's about making sure that when someone else makes a mistake or has a bad day, your Homelab doesn't become collateral damage. Keep local copies of your Docker images that you depend on. If a project disappears and you're on a pinned tag that you still have locally, you have some breathing room. Also, back up your data in a format that you can actually export and read without the app. If your data lives in a schema that only the app understands and the app disappears, you're going to have a problem. Be sure to rotate API keys immediately if a project disappears under suspicious circumstances, especially if, like Huntarr, the project was sitting in the middle of your authentication stack. Also, be sure to follow the project's community channels so that you hear about problems early. In both the Booklore and Huntarr situations, the community knew about the issues well before most users did. Reddit, Discord, GitHub issues, these are your early warning system. And make sure you have a migration plan before you need one. Ask yourself, if this app disappeared tomorrow, what would I do? If you can't answer that, it's worth thinking through that now rather than in the middle of a crisis. The self-hosting community is built on trust. Trust that the software you run is what it says it is. Trust that it'll be here tomorrow. Trust that if something goes wrong, someone is going to fix it. Most of the time that trust is earned. The open source ecosystem is full of projects with dedicated maintainers, strong communities, and years of reliable service. Don't let Booklore and Huntarr make you cynical about all of it. But trust should be informed. Knowing what to look for before you depend on something isn't paranoia. It's just good Homelab hygiene. The checklist I walked through costs you maybe 10 minutes before you install something. And that's a pretty reasonable trade for the peace of mind of knowing what you're actually running on your network. As always, all of the sources and links are in the video description, and be sure to drop your thoughts in the comments. I'm especially curious whether anyone in the community was running either of these apps when it happened, and I'd love to know how you handled that situation. But with all of that said, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. I want to thank you guys for spending a few minutes of your day with me here today, and I'll talk to you in the next video.